We're going to add some pry slots to this cavity side of the mold. This is a place to put your screwdriver, or in my case I use kind of a stiff paint scraper, which I find works really good. We're going to put 2 slots in. They're about 1/8 of an inch deep, and then I've got a sketch here that I've added those on, and then we're going to set those down about 0.075 of an inch, and that's enough to get your paint scraper in there. Let's take a look at where we're going to put the sprue, and we're going to start by looking at the core side of the mold. And in an earlier version of this mold, in the cavity side, I put a sprue location that would drop plastic into the middle of one of these ribs where you see flashing, and the plastic would run up and down the rib and then around both sides of the mold and eventually vent out to the side. That worked okay, but not as good as I wanted, and I'm going to try to do another iteration here where the cavity is going to drop that into the corner of the mold instead. Let's take a look at the object we're trying to injection mold. Originally I had a sprue that would come in from the bottom on one of those ribs, and that worked okay, but it wasn't always perfect, and I think I want to put a sprue instead into the corner where it's a little thicker. Hopefully we get plastic running both directions, down the sides, through the ribs, and then out the opposite corner. Let's go back to the core side of the mold and look at how we're going to get that in there. I've created a sketch that shows the outline of the cavity, but we put a 3/32 inch circle in there, and then that'll be where the sprue is dropping into that corner, and then also added a line and on the opposite corner, and that's going to be a trace for where the flash and the vent control is going to go. All of these features are going to go into the cavity side, even though we're showing it on the core side. We wanted to do that so that we knew where the sprue was going to come in at. If we turn on the cavity and flip it around, we'll see where the sketch is showing the sprue. We're going to select that and then extrude it through the cavity. Doesn't matter how far, because we just need to get it all the way through. We're going to turn the sketch back on. That line there is now where we want to put a vent. So we want to vent air and any flash out the side, and instead of doing that as a slot, we're going to save that to the milling operation and use a trace operation to go through that. Let's go quickly through the cam side of this. I've got a setup that's got a origin in the middle of the piece. It's a 4x4 aluminum. We're going to hog out the middle there with a 1/4 inch roughing bit, then 1/4 inch roughing bit on the guide holes, then 1/4 inch 4-flute end mill on the bottom to finish. Then we're switching to a 3/16 4-flute end mill to do profiling and finishing work, and we're going to finish the guide holes, and then switching then to a 3/32 end mill. We're going to mill the vent that's there, and I'm showing that we're using an axial stock of -0.05 there on that trace. And then we're going to chamfer the edges and then do a 3/32 inch drill hole for the sprue. We're not quite done yet. In my injection molding machine, I've got a sprue that comes down in the middle, and instead of changing all the stops around, which would screw up my standards, I'm going to put a 3rd plate on top of this. That's going to be a runner plate. And so what we'll need to do is to create some pins on the top of this mold. I've created another sketch that matched the other pins, and we'll extrude this down. And from here, then we create another sketch that's going to be a runner from the center where the sprue comes down from the machine, and then run that over to the hole where the sprue is going to go down into the mold. And this is going to be all done into the 3/8 inch plate that's going to sit above it. So I've already done this, and I'm just moving the timeline ahead here. So that's an extruded 3/8 inch plate. We're going to flip it around, take a look. You can kind of see where that runner is going to go. Turn off the cavity, Now we're going to extrude that runner down. This is just a simple square slot, so there's no curve or anything like that. And then we're going to put a 1/8 inch sprue that comes in from the top. So that's a 1/8 inch runner. Turn the cavity back on so you can kind of see it. We'll also put the core back in with this, and then what I'd like to do is use the section tool, and we'll show where that whole thing drops all the way through from the top to the bottom. So here comes the section tool. Select one of the sides, and then we'll run that back. Okay, now we're starting to see where the runner was, and now with this section you can see where the runner runs from the flat bottom and then runs down through the piece and then into the mold. Alright, let's jump over to the already machined piece now. This is a mold that was based off that design. That's the top piece that has the runner from the middle down nozzle into the runner onto the sprue over in the corner. Now we'll lift the second section off, and this is the cavity, and on the lower right you can see the vent going off to the side, and then the sprue in the upper left hand corner of the cavity. This is always a trick to do with one hand while you're filming. Now that's the core side, and we'll put it all back together and then run it in the injection molding machine. I've got about 100 shots on this mold, and you'll be able to see it mostly from the top of the mold where I used a kind of a wide wood chisel to scrape the sprue off. This particular machine only has like a flush nozzle on it, so you have to scrape that off. Now let's go over to the molding machine. I'm going to do this one-handed as well, and what we do is center up the mold under the nozzle. That's why I have the marks there. Then we have the compression jack for the clamp force, so doing that. And then I've converted this machine over to a fully hydraulic, so I just press the button there, and there's about a count of 5, and that was empirically determined by just doing short shots and long shots to find the right count. This is what the mold looks like when the runner guide has been taken off. You can see the center sprue as well as the secondary as well as the runner. After removing the cavity, you see the core, and the part is there now. And on the lower left you can see where we controlled the flash through the vent, and now we're left with a part that's got a small sprue in the upper right hand corner and then a vented set of ABS coming out the left hand side there. So I end up using a wide flat wood chisel to just lift that part. It's fairly shallow, so at this point I'm not planning to do any sort of stripper plate or any kind of ejection pin. I'll just lift it off the core and then clip it with flush cutters for the 2 sprues in the vent, and I'll have my part. There's the finished part. I use flush cutters to clip off the vent flash as well as the sprue, and we've got a part ready to go now. It takes about 1 minute to turn that around when I'm in production, and then I just throw the parts in a bin and flush cut them later. Well, I hope that was helpful for you. If you found that of interest, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing and ringing the bell, and maybe I'll get some more of these put out for you. Thanks for watching.